Good morning, everybody. It's really, again, I've already said this, I know, but it's really a joy to be with you this morning as you celebrate these 95 years of history of mission and ministry in St. Cloud. I was reflecting this morning, my first time in St. Cloud was in about 1962, give or take a little bit, so just a little while ago. I remember when, in those days, almost nothing. A lot more cows than people, that's for sure. So it is great to be with you and great to reflect on that history. I'm obviously not Sam Gilkey. Sam has been in the hospital. I think he's still there. So let's remember as we worship together this morning to pray for him and for his rapid recovery. My understanding is that he's doing much better today than yesterday, and yesterday better than the day before. So we'll keep praying that he is very much on the road to recovery. And perhaps he can find another time to share with you some of the memories that he was going to share with you this morning. I don't have those memories of this congregation, though, and so I'm going to go in a little bit different, direction as we share. First of all, those of you who are sort of closer to my age may remember a television commercial from years ago. It was a ketchup commercial. It was entitled, every commercial, I don't know if you know this or not, but every commercial has a title. Just like a movie has a title or a TV show has a title, commercials do too. And there was a ketchup commercial many years ago called Anticipation. Yeah, Carly Simon song, very good. It was, based in the Carly Simon song it had the music that was the background, and no, I'm not going to sing this morning, but Anticipation, was that idea, and it showed a little boy with a bottle of ketchup. Glass bottle of ketchup. You can't even find a glass bottle of ketchup anymore, I don't think. They're all squeezed. And it was brand new, just opened up, and so it was chock full. And he turned it upside down over a hot dog, which, of course, if you're over 10 years old, is a mortal sin. I spent way too much time in Chicago, and I think mustard's the only thing. So, But he's there, and he holds it, and he holds it, and he holds it, and it's that anticipation. And you can see that dollop of ketchup getting ready to drop, right? And finally, you see it come out of the bottle and drop on the hot dog, and everybody is laughing and smiling, and you can't wait to get to the grocery store and buy a bottle of ketchup, and of course, go outside in your wonderful pavilion out here and grill some hamburgers and hot dogs and be ready. And no, I'm not going to be the police this morning, so if you want ketchup on your hot dog, have it. But remember that anticipation, right? Remember that anticipation, because I think this Sunday morning, the 7th Sunday of Easter, I believe is about anticipation as much as is it about anything else. It's about anticipation. Put yourself in the mindset sort of these disciples for just a few minutes with me this morning. So we're told in the first chapter of Acts, which was read this morning, we're told in that first chapter of Acts that they're walking out from the city of Jerusalem with Jesus, and he's teaching them. They ask him, first of all, a question. When is the kingdom of Israel going to be restored? Is now the time, or when is going to be the time? When is that going to happen? So in some ways, they're still anticipating something that really isn't going to happen in some ways. I mean, they're still thinking in some ways that Jesus is going to restore the kingdom and he's going to be the king, and it's just, it's going to go along that way. They're still thinking in some ways along political lines rather than along the lines that Jesus is in fact talking about as he talks about the kingdom of heaven. They're still wondering, but even there, they're anticipating. They're anticipating something new, something different. They're anticipating change taking place in their lives. And so they're walking out. We're told in Acts that they go a Sabbath day's journey. Now, you and I need to understand that a Sabbath day journey is not very far. Okay? It was how far you were allowed to walk to get to synagogue on a Sabbath day. And it's a matter of blocks. in our language. I mean, it's not a great distance at all. It's a matter of just a few blocks that they were allowed to walk to get to the synagogue. And so they go out a Sabbath day's journey. So they don't go very far outside of Jerusalem. Over to we think and we're told in some ways to the Mount of Olivet, which is just outside the city gates, really. And so they go there, and while they're there, Jesus continues to teach them. And then Jesus is lifted up in what we now call the ascension. He's lifted up and he's taken off into heaven. Now, again, put yourself in the minds of those disciples. What was it that they must have been thinking? You know, they still had an idea based on their first question that there's this idea that Jesus is going to establish this kingdom, and in some ways Jesus is going to be king, and now he's not there. Or so it seems. He's not there. Or so it seems. He's been taken away from them. And they still don't really know what's next. Now, it's interesting what they do. They go back into the city. They go back into the upper room where they have been. Apparently, they go back and they gather there, and we're told that they remained there in prayer and in worship, in sharing one another, and in fellowship with one another, that they remained there doing that while, in some ways, they waited for what was next. Now, we know what was next because we know next Saturday, instead of T-shirts, you're going to be wearing red because it's the Feast of Pentecost and the coming of the Holy Spirit. Maybe you're not going to be wearing red, but a lot of people will be in a lot of our churches. Be wearing red, and certainly the clergy who are here will be wearing red, and there'll be, all kinds for the flames of the Holy Spirit that come down and touch the heads of the disciples as you celebrate Pentecost next week. But at this point, they're waiting. They don't know exactly what's next. They don't know exactly what's going to happen, but they're anticipating. That anticipation is still there because they know that Jesus has promised. They remember probably while they're praying together and while they're in fellowship together, they probably think back just a few days, a week or so, 2 weeks or something before, where they've been gathered together with Jesus in the Last Supper. And they remember this high priestly prayer that Jesus prays that we read in the gospel this morning from chapter 17 of John's gospel. The whole chapter is a prayer that Jesus is praying. And for the most part, my friends, that prayer is for you and me. That prayer is for those who are going to remain. That prayer is for those who believe. That prayer is not just for those disciples, not just those apostles, not just the others who are gathered together, the women that were there, as we're told in Acts. It's not just for those people who are gathered right there. It's for you and I, gathered still in worship and in fellowship with one another. It's a prayer that we will be protected. It's a prayer that we will be comforted. It is a prayer that we will be loved. It is a prayer that we will be one with one another. It's a prayer that is for you and for me. And I have to believe that those disciples remembered the moment just not too long before the time when they were there gathered in the upper room. They remembered that prayer that Jesus prayed for them, and again, for you and for me. And it's in that they could rest in anticipation. Because, in between times, that's kind of what I call this Sunday, is an in-between Sunday. In between Jesus ascending and the coming of the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, in those in-between times is a time of uncertainty. It's a time sort of mystery. It's a time when there's questions. It can be even a scary time. 1 Peter tells us this morning that there's even going to be a fiery ordeal. And of course that happened during Peter's time. I don't think we're going to undergo a fiery ordeal, but We can still hit scary times. We can still hit uncertain times. And that's what in-between times give us. In-between times give us those times of uncertainty. You, as a congregation, are in an in-between time, right? Not news. You're in an in-between time. The previous rector, Richard, he's moved and is doing other ministry now, and you have a search committee, and you're anticipating. At least I hope you are. I hope Carly Simon's song, Anticipation, is loud in your ears. And if you're just remembering that song this morning, I hope it does one of those worm things in your ears. And you hear it over and over again as you go through the rest of this day. Anticipation. Ready for what God is going to do next. Praying for what God is going to do next. Being in fellowship, giving God even thanks for what God is going to do next. It's that in-between time. It's a time of anticipation. And we know the result of these disciples staying there waiting. We know the result of these disciples staying there in anticipation. We know the result of them remaining in fellowship with one another, staying together, being in unity with one another, praying with one another, worshiping with one another. The result was the coming of the Holy Spirit. The result was the coming of the Holy Spirit, wrapping them, holding them, protecting them, giving them every gift they needed to meet the next challenges. Giving them gifts, and we're told, I'm stealing from next week's sermon perhaps, but even the energy, the power, the authority to go out and preach. And 5,000, we are told, were baptized on that day of Pentecost, were brought to life in Jesus Christ. That's what we anticipate. Now, I will go ahead and tell you that your search committee has done fabulous work. They really have, together with Canon Brust, who's been the face of that group. Your profile is terrific. It's posted on national websites. It's posted on our diocesan website. And yes, we have people applying. So we have people applying for the position. And so that anticipation is actually getting ready to bear fruit. Just like we're getting ready to celebrate Pentecost in just a week's time. But my encouragement to you this morning, my prayer for you this morning is to anticipate. Anticipate. God is at work. And we need to expect God to be at work. We need to anticipate God being at work in our lives as individuals and in our life as a congregation. Because God is at work. We need to stay together prayerfully and in fellowship with one another. Even hamburgers and hot dogs are holy in this in-between time. Anticipate, and pray that God will act and that God's glory will be seen. Because I believe that's the promise of this day. That's the promise of this in-between time. That's the promise of anticipation. Amen.